hence sterling.
For more on finance, we're joined by Rod North, Executive Director at Bourse Communications. Rod, good to see you again.
Good morning.
So, as the first bank to report its profits as part of this reporting season, what do you make of what the ANZ's had to say?
Well, I think that's a pretty good result, a $6 billion profit, and I think the market was giving us a bit of an indication of that yesterday because all bank shares have been rising. In fact, we've had 9 days out of 10 of markets rising, but the ANZ shares went up 1.7% yesterday, so the market was sort of indicating that they expected they'd be putting in a pretty good result, as have, you know, the other major banks as well. And I mean, it's been astounding, really, because you look at even National Bank, for example, their shares have risen 47% this year. I think people sort of lose sight of the fact that the share market, you know, particularly for the top stocks and particularly for banks, has risen, you know, very dramatically over the course of the year to date, and that's put our market now, the share market, up 15% since the 1st of January. So I suppose people will probably start and get a bit excited, because I think when people used to get their superannuation, you know, quarterly returns, they probably didn't bother opening the envelope. But I think, you know, when we see the next couple of quarters reporting, there'll probably be better news for people. But certainly banks, you know, have had a very good position over the last few years. They had that deposit guarantee, you know, under the period of time during the GFC. Some of the smaller banks weren't too happy about that because obviously it was harder for them to borrow money with lower credit ratings, and thought it was interesting yesterday with the Bank of Adelaide and Bendigo Bank having their AGM sort of making that comment that they thought, you know, with the financial inquiry that's going to occur, that, you know, perhaps, you know, the dominance of the banks perhaps needs to be looked at over the course of the next 12 months.
They do have a heavy weighting on the Australian market, and that rise in bank shares has contributed to what has been a mini run on the market, hasn't it?
Yeah, we're really what you'd have to say in the middle of a sort of very strong bull market run in the share market, and I think that's been driven largely by companies like the banks being able to increase their earnings, and of course what that will also mean is that the dividends paid to shareholders should also increase as well, or at least be maintained. And if dividends are maintained or increased, shares you know, continue to move up. So there's every expectation that the share market in this sort of climate, where we've had the uncertainty you know, removed about, you know, the federal election, about the position in the US, that sort of creates a much more favourable environment for the share market.
Now, RBA Governor Glenn Stevens is speaking today.
Yes, that's going to be very interesting in Sydney at a Citigroup annual meeting, and of course we'll be very keen to see what he has to say, particularly in the light of a whole range of factors, including the fact that you know, last week the inflation numbers sort of came out for the September quarter a bit higher at 1.2% when we were expecting a 0.8% increase. We've got the dollar still at 96 cents. We've got the property market, you know, going gangbusters over the weekend. I mean, in Sydney the clearance rates are now sort of 80%. And the property market up in Sydney has increased 11%, you know, so far this year. So I think the Reserve Bank and the board have got a lot to sort of look at the moment, because there's a whole lot of sort of factors mitigating in favour of, you know, maybe rates, you know, are at the, you know, bottom of the level now, but yet, you know, there's still a forecast for unemployment, you know, to rise, you know, potentially up to 6%. So there's a lot of mixed messages out there, and, you know, it's still pretty unsustainable to have the dollar, you know, at 96 cents as well, which doesn't help, you know, our local manufacturers one bit.
I keep hearing people say this, but there's not much you can do about it.
Not much.
Good on you, Rod.
Watch
Thanks so
this
much.
space.
Yeah, thank you. Now, coming up on News Breakfast, we're speaking to historian David Day about his controversial new book on Antarctic explorer Douglas Mawson. Now, this is a book that you've had a close look at, Michael.
Yes.
What are the outrageous allegations?
Well, that Douglas Mawson ate one of his fellow trekkers.